Hi everyone! Today is Friday, June 17th. My name is Patricia Valdovinos. Most people call me Patty. Thank you for joining us for another podcast of our RUSA podcast series. Joining me today is Joe Thompson, Senior Administrator in Public Services with the Harford County Public Library. I hope I said that right.
Hi, you did, Joe. Yeah, perfect. Hi Patty, good to talk with you.
Yeah, how are you?
Things are great, yeah. So I'm here in Maryland. I know you're far away, but I'm glad we could find a time to talk.
Yes, it's 3 hours in difference, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's nighttime here, and it's probably still daytime where you are.
Yeah, no, it's really bright outside. We're actually getting a heat wave. I think it starts tomorrow, but I feel it, so...
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I wanted to begin the podcast by asking you to tell me a little bit about yourself, your position, how you ended up where you are. So if you can share a little bit, anything you'd like to share.
Sure. Well, wow. I guess I'll go back to. I've been working in libraries for 24 years.
Woohoo!
Yeah. So I'll have my quarter century next year.
Yeah.
That makes it seem really long. So I started back in '92 as a circulation assistant, a part-time circulation assistant, or as in other libraries you call it a page, with the Baltimore County Public Library. And I just shelved books, and after I proved that I could put the nonfiction in order, then they let me work on the fiction, and then eventually work my way up to the VHS and CDs. Yeah. So so I did that for a few years. Became a part-time supervisor of the circulation staff while I was in college. Then went on to becoming what we call here in Maryland a library associate.
Okay. So
that's somebody that has a bachelor's degree, but then they attend this state-sanctioned course that allows the person to function with many of the responsibilities of the librarians, the MLS librarians.
Okay.
And and then did get my library degree at University of Maryland, College Park. Go Terrapins. And so then worked at the Towson Library, which is the county seat of Baltimore County, as a library associate, and got to take a lot of responsibility in charge of the reference collection and the information desk there. And that was a wonderful experience, and that informed a lot of my philosophies in terms of how to help the public and to give them what they want philosophy, which really started at Baltimore County Public Library. And then where did I go from there? Oh, I had this awesome opportunity to, I applied for this pilot project that was a virtual reference project. So this is going back to 2001. And it was just a pilot between two libraries, which was actually Baltimore County and Harford County, which now I work for. So I got to meet some of the staff way back then. And that developed into a statewide project called Maryland Ask Us Now. And that was amazing because I got to meet lots of people across the state of Maryland who work in academic libraries, special libraries, and of course public libraries. And I did all the training, and it was a lot of fun. So where did I go from there? I feel like I'm doing a brain dump. It's just the whole resume just sort of dumped out.
Let me just read it off.
So then I went out to Western Maryland, and I was the associate director out there for 5.5 years of the Western Maryland Regional Library. So that's one of Maryland's 3 state-sanctioned regional libraries, which provide service to the more rural parts of the state. And really the focus there is to bring the level of service up to the same as what the Central Maryland libraries, public libraries experience. And now I've been with Harford County for 2 years, so I've really worked in 3 different organizations now as a librarian. So that's a quick synopsis of where I've come. But if you have any questions about any pieces of that, I'm happy to talk about it. But of course I got involved in RUSA along the way too.
Yeah. And so from my understanding, it seems like you worked mostly for public libraries. Am I understanding correctly?
Yes, I have, yeah. Now, when I was with Ask Us Now, I was training academic librarians and special librarians on how to provide reference service through the chat environment and page-pushing environment. But yes, I have not actually worked at an academic library. I did work down at Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore on Sundays, but that's, again, a public library.
Oh, okay. And what has made you stick to public librarianship and not venture out to academic?
I thought about it at various points in my career. I thought about, I could work at a community college or university setting, and you just kind of take the opportunities as they come along. And I really loved working in public libraries because I thrive on that personal interaction with people. So it's allowed me to satisfy my mood. But it's been really wonderful because I get to see really the direct, immediate impact that helping people is having. So it's been a lot of fun working in public libraries. I did think at one point about a PhD, but in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't go that route.
Oh, that's so interesting. Can you, random thought, right? But I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate this. But can you tell me what or why you decided, or maybe it's still in the books, but maybe later in the years, but what led you not to pursue a PhD? Because I'm in that situation. I just graduated. Okay. But I'm like, is a PhD, in my future, right? So.
Well, I talked with some people that I really respected who, work at in eye schools at some other places, like up at Rutgers and Syracuse and down at College Park, University of Maryland. And I realized that, a lot of really the primary reasons that people should get, and now people are probably going to disagree with me on this, but my understanding is the reason you should really want a PhD is because you love research. Yeah. And when I really thought about it, I'm like, well, I really love teaching and training and working with people. So, and maybe the philosophy of why you get your PhD has changed in the last, 10, 15 years. But at that point, that's what I was informed about. So I thought, well, maybe that's not really what's in it for me. Plus, I was also thinking about the 4 to 7 years of a dissertation, and but I don't know if I want to invest that much money and time. And I was at a point in my life where I was thinking about starting a family too. So that certainly had an impact.
No, definitely. Yeah, these are all things that I'm thinking about, right? Well, obviously, I'm not going to go this year, but I'm like, maybe in the next few years, but I'm in the same situation, right? Like, another 4 to 5 years, and I love research, but I don't know if I want to pursue that for a lifelong thing, so thank you for sharing that.
Well, you've got a great new position at Los Angeles Public Library, isn't that right?
Yes, I do. I am there. Well, it's working with them and then the Library Foundation. So I'm their summer author coordinator until September, which I'm coordinating to bring in different authors to LAPL branches. So they want to conduct 40 programs with 15 to 20 authors, so I'm just coordinating that. I'm also...
You're just coordinating that. That sounds huge.
I'm coordinating it. So I'm in contact with the authors and the branches. It's actually really exciting. I'm 99% sure that I have confirmed all the authors today, and so I came home and I was like, yay, I feel so accomplished. It's Friday too.
Just the way you're describing it, it sounds like it's a great opportunity because it sounds like you're getting to meet pretty much all the people that work at the branches. You're getting to make all these connections with the community. I think it sounds like the perfect kind of opportunity for somebody who's a recent MLS graduate.
I took it. Well, I accepted it, and I was really excited about that. And then they also offered me a full steam ahead coordinator position, which I will be coordinating full steam ahead the programs that they're doing with LAPL. So that's in the beginning of it. So I'm still learning of the position and stuff. So hopefully in the next upcoming weeks, I will be able to know and understand more of what's going on with that position. But
that sounds awesome. Does LAPL have maker labs, those sorts of environments?
They have maker spaces. They're building one. I think I forgot the name of the branch, so I don't want to give you the wrong information, but they're building some. And so it's really exciting to see that. It's really exciting to see STEAM programs being developed within LAPL or public libraries, so I'm really excited to be a part of that.
That's really cool. Yeah, we opened our first, we call it the Digital Media Lab, but it does have four 3D printers.
Okay.
And really our philosophy at Harford County is, we want to be able to inform, especially late elementary, middle, and high school students, how this kind of technology works so that they'll have an awareness of additive manufacturing when they apply to go to college or they start getting jobs, and they'll already have this sense of familiarity with the technology so that they're not they'll have an advantage over hopefully other candidates.
No, yeah, definitely. I think it's important to. I think there was like a huge gap where math and science wasn't like students. Me as a student, right? In high school, I was just not that interested in math and science. But I'm glad that the library system is doing more to engage students from an early age, even into adulthood, right? I think that's where it's like it's never too late, and I think I'm a firm believer in that it's never too late to pick up science, art, math, engineering, and all the other. It's weird to when people say, "Oh, you just graduated and now you're working." I'm like, yeah, it is. It scares me, and I'm nervous and still very excited at the same time.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I mean, really, like it sounds like you're doing at least 2 full-time jobs based on what you've described. But I think it just sounds like 2 things, though, that's going to give you a lot of opportunities to connect with people and get a lot of experience. So it sounds like you're totally in the right spot right now.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the positive vibes, I call them. But going back to talking a little bit about yourself, you mentioned that along the way you got involved with RUSA. I wanted to ask you if you mind sharing a little bit about that too.
Oh, sure. Definitely happy to. So it was during that time that I was actually, it was funny. It was the same time that I was responsible for, taking charge of the planning for the statewide project, which at that point was 2003. Mm-hmm. And I attended my first ALA, which was the Toronto ALA/CLA, Canada Library Association conference up in Toronto, and this was the conference that people that have been around for many years will remember was the SARS outbreak was going on, and I think it was maybe half the people that had registered for the conference ended up not going because of that. But then it ended up, for those of us that went, I think most of us had a great conference, and for me, I drove up from Maryland and I got to see Niagara Falls on the way, so that was pretty cool.
Whole vacation.
And but what was really neat is I attended a program that was about virtual reference service, and after the program, I had asked, at the end during the Q&A, I raised my hand and I asked a question, and then one of the co-chairs of the committee approached me at the end and said, "Oh, by the way, there's a committee that organized this. We'd love to have new members." And of course, at that point, I had no concept about how programs came about, and I'm like, "Oh, well, that sounds cool." So I went back and talked with my supervisor, and ended up joining the committee. And then I went to the next ALA the following year, which was in Orlando. So now we're back around to going to Orlando again for an ALA. And it was really neat because I was meeting a lot of really smart people, like a good friend of mine, Marie Radford. She's up at Rutgers University. And we ended up giving a presentation on virtual reference that following year in Orlando. So, but it was really neat. And I think it's one of those things where, you never know this one connection you make with somebody at a conference, and then it leads to them getting involved in the committee, and then one thing leads to another. And I was then asked to to chair a new committee, co-chair a new committee. It was the RSS Mars Virtual Reference Committee. And I just went on from there and just stayed involved and kept doing the work and showing up for meetings. And they eventually asked me to run for president. So second time around was the charm. So got to do that, and now I'm just coming off being past president of RUSA here at this conference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's been a great experience. I mean, I've gotten to meet so many really amazing people and do a lot of really valuable work. So it's been a lot of fun.
RUSA is great, and from the past interviewees, they've also shared the same thing, right? Where RUSA allows for this network to happen. So I always like to ask how you got involved with RUSA and the different projects and where it led you, right? And I think you shared quite an interesting and exciting story with your involvement in RUSA. So thank you.
Yeah, and I feel like it's now my responsibility and for all of us that have been involved in the organization for years. Like when we have these events at ALA, like the RUSA 101 or RUSA Socials, we need to really be looking for those people walking in the room that don't know anybody and make sure to, not attack them, but, immediately engage them and, find out what their interests are and really, really help them make the connection so that they can be successful in this professional organization and in their careers too.
No, it's true. I'm glad to hear that because I know sometimes I walk into rooms where I'm like in these networking events, right, coming off school, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And so I noticed that in the last when I went to Midwinter is that RUSA is very engaged, right? Very like, come join us. And so I really appreciate that as being a person who's new to these circles. So.
Yeah, we really try hard. Yep, and we've got some great events coming up in Orlando, so I don't know when we'll be able to post this podcast, but I really hope people will join us for it. And for example, we've got a RUSA 101 that's on that Friday, and that's a great opportunity for people to connect and just meet, and it's very casual.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll have this up before Orlando.
Awesome.
So I also wanted to ask you if there was anything interesting or exciting happening at Hartford Public Library.
Yeah, so actually it's been an amazing week at Hartford County Public Library. So we just opened a new branch that was under construction for about a year and a half. Just this Wednesday morning. So one of our communities is called is Havre Grace. It's right on the Susquehanna River, where the Susquehanna flows into the Chesapeake Bay. And we just opened this brand new library there. It's almost 20,000 square feet, which doubled the size of the old building that was at that location. So we'd had a temporary spot over by the waterfront for that year and a half. And it's funny, the branch manager there, she'd been taking all these pictures of the beautiful view of the boats and the piers and the docks there. So she had to take a picture of that view and take it to the new library with her.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I was like, did she post those pictures on at the new library?
It's on her wall, but the library itself is beautiful. So there's so much going on there. We have this interactive early literacy center called Schooner Cove, which actually it looks like the front of like a skipjack or a pirate ship coming out of the wall, and children can go underneath and play and really get these full-fledged experiences there in this interactive play area. So we're really lucky to be able to develop that. So that's for children from birth up to 5 years old to have these experiences. Yeah. So that was sponsored by a local credit union here in Hartford County.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've got a business center, and soon enough we'll be putting some 3D printers also up in this area that's geared towards older elementary kids, and it's just a lot of fun. And oh my gosh, the opening got great coverage. It got covered by 3 of the local Baltimore TV stations and the Baltimore Sun. So we just had a really awesome article posted yesterday in the paper. So yeah, anyway, it's been a really amazing week, and things are still coming together a little bit there, but really the public's been extremely supportive, and we just really appreciate all the support of the staff and making it all come together and work.
Yeah. What's been the most exciting or interesting thing you've heard about the opening, or once the library opened?
Just this amazement, because it's just a very different building than the old one. The old building was one story, one floor, so it was really, really tiny. And I think a perfect example is just the meeting room. So in the old library, it was basically like, I don't know, it seemed like it was the size of like a large bedroom, basically, with the old meeting room. But at the new library, we actually have a dedicated space. So basically, when you come in on the first floor, there's staff offices are down there too, but we do have this large meeting room that can hold over 100 people. We also have a conference room down there that can be rented by the public too, but we can use it for library programming, which is really neat because on Monday, this coming week, is the kickoff to our big summer reading program for the whole county, and we're going to have a magician in there, and all the sponsors for our summer reading program are going to be there. Actually, we're calling it Summer Reading Challenge this year. Yeah, but just having this public space is so important for a modern public library, because we're not just warehouses of books and materials anymore. We have to have a dynamic space for people to actually have these interactive experiences, and just having a big meeting room makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no, where libraries become community settings, and once you offer these big spaces, you can see that. So I'm really happy and excited for you all.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just great. So, been a very good week. So, as we speak, this is Friday night as we speak. So,
I know, and it's Friday.
I can't believe because I'm still awake, but no, it's all good.
It's technically my first weekend as a non-student and just a full-time worker. So I'm like, whoa, this is my first like Friday where I don't have schoolwork. And so
wow, congratulations.
It's weird, right? Yeah. So I was like, it's Friday. Okay, thank you for sharing all that. We're gonna shift a little bit. So I want today's podcast to also be focused around the future of reference. And so, Joseph, I understand that recently you presented on this topic alongside two of your other colleagues at the Maryland and Delaware Library Association conference about a month ago. Am I correct?
That's right, yeah. And actually, I got to give credit to my co-presenters. And it was Cafe Keogh and Laura Bosley. And Cafe Keogh she was the brains behind suggesting this topic. She's an active RUSA member, so I wanted to make sure to get her name too. And so these RUSA people are all over the place.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm like RUSA. I'm always about promoting and sharing.
Cafe would be a good person for a future I Am RUSA podcast too.
Yeah. So hopefully she hears this, or they hear this, and they're all like, hey, can we do a podcast interview?
That would be great. But she's fantastic. We used to work together. Actually, we've worked together in multiple different organizations. But she's now over in Delaware, and she's the executive director of the Delaware Library Association. And she had suggested we do this, looking ahead to the future of reference. And we were trying to figure out, well, how do we make it? For me, one of the things that's important about our program is you actually give the participants these tips or these things that they can go back and then immediately apply to their jobs or their workplace in some way. And reflecting back on I worked with Marie Radford years ago. Yeah. That was one of the things that was awesome about that, because she would do the research, and then I would be able to, me and others would be able to help then talk about how do we actually put this into practice to make it meaningful for attendees. And so that's what Cafe and Laura and I really tried to focus on was, taking a look. Cafe took a look back at really the evolution of reference services, and Laura highlighted some of the current research, and then my focus was really trying to look ahead at some of the trends that we're seeing being practiced in libraries today, and where they might be taking us over. And we said 5 years just to keep it some context. We're not talking about 100 years out when the synchronicity has happened, or no, what's the term? Anyway, but all the robots take over.
Yeah, that was one of my questions was like, so why 5 years, right? But before we begin, I wanted to ask you if those listening wanted to see your slides, because they use PowerPoint slides. So, can you let us know where people can find these slides?
Yes. So the MLA DLA conference site has a lanyard site. So let me say it out loud here. It's http://lanyard. That's LANYD.com/profile/Joe-Thompson.
Okay.
Then you'll see all three of our PowerPoint presentations.
Okay.
And mine it's on the left. So if you click on the left PowerPoint, that's the one that's my slides.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to make sure in case anyone wanted to follow us. I was like, they could see the slides too. But yes, going back to my question. So you said 5 years just so that it doesn't seem so far stretched, right? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because I think it's important that as librarians or public service members, if that's the correct word or term, that we don't bring in these ideas that are like for 100 years, right? Because things change, communities change, people change, new trends. And so I wanted you to share a little bit about why 5 years, aside from alongside what you just said.
Yeah, so it's exactly that. So and actually, one of the things I did was, we were supposed to be talking about 5 years out. I actually reflected a bit on something that I was involved in back in 2008. So I sort of jumped back by 8 years now to sort of kick things off. But this idea, is it okay if I talk about this idea of the definition of reference?
Yes.
Sure. So basically, So RUSA has developed and updated its own definition of what reference means over the years. And the last time was it was approved by the RUSA board in 2008. And one of the things I talked about was I was actually on the board of the Reference Services Section, RSS, at that point, and approved it at that section level, and then it got approved at the RUSA board level, and basically said, you know what, I think we got part of it wrong in a big way, and I was part of that. So what we did is we approved this definition of specifically a reference transaction, but there's a piece of this that I just feel like it was way too limiting at that point, because it says that it does not include formal instruction. It also mentions that it doesn't include interactions, exchanges that are involving equipment, but it doesn't mention, so one, it's like so much of what we do as reference librarians is show people how to use technology, devices, whether they be the devices that are in the libraries, like the PCs and 3D printers and things like that, but, the devices that people are bringing in. And I think, from a public library perspective, anybody that's in public libraries, you always get that deluge of the e-readers and the tablets after, the winter holidays. People get them as presents, and they're like, I don't know how to use this, please help me. And we need to be able to help people at least navigate to our online resources, to our ebooks, audiobooks that we provide. And some libraries, of course, go further and actually help people use the device for other purposes too. So when I look back at this definition, it's just so limiting. And my fear is that, when leaders in the profession are making decisions, they're basing some of their decisions on the way that this kind of a definition is written, and it just doesn't fully represent the full scope of services that we are offering as reference librarians. So it's kind of unfortunate. So something that Ann Houston, our current president, and I know you interviewed her a few weeks back for the first I Am RUSA podcast. I know this is something that she's interested in doing too, is revisiting the definition of reference and getting it revised. And this is something I'm interested in too, for this specific reason, is we really need to look at expanding the scope.
No, yeah, I definitely agree, because when I was interning at R.L. Stevenson, which is an LAPL branch, we got patrons who would come in and be like, I got locked out of my cell phone, can you help me figure this out, right? And so if this isn't included in our definition of what we do, then, what are we really doing? And who is really defining our profession, right? Because it continues to grow, right? As the world changes, as our community changes, our profession changes too. And so I think it's an important topic that we need to continue developing. So I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're on the same page too. Hopefully we'll have lots of other people that are interested in working on this too.
I'm like, no, it's true, right? Because people, we're not just sitting there and not changing as our community changes. And so as more patrons come in and more trends develop, because trends is one thing that you talk about in your presentation too, which is why I keep bringing it up. We need to also be able to catch up and understand and bring these services to them, right? So I think as we are expanding our position and our careers, we need to also define and expand these definitions. So I'm a big believer in change, right? And moving with the community and not just, staying in the same place, because, we leave people out that way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, so many classes, so many libraries are offering, classes or structured classes now on how to use the resources, how to, apply for a job, how to, use the digital library resources. That it seems almost, when we say that in the definition that it doesn't include formal instruction, I'm thinking how much effort we put into putting these classes together, and we can't count that. then again, all right, let's think if the library was not being proactive and it was not holding these classes, and we were only being responsive by just waiting for people to come in and ask these questions, then those we count. It doesn't seem right. So it seems like we should be giving ourselves credit for all the effort we're putting into actually structuring and organizing these formal classes too. So, for many reasons, I just want to see us expand the scope of this definition. and I think in the end, it's going to make reference service more relevant to our communities if we can continue to use that terminology. And that's one of the questions I prompted in the presentation was, do we restructure the definition, or do we have to come up with some new term to describe this scope of services?
No, yeah, I think it's important. And so, I mean, this might be a very controversial question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. But so,
sure.
It's going to sound really weird and kind of blunt, but it's like, so what's the purpose though? Why change it, or why have this discussion?
Okay, that's an excellent question.
Because I feel like, people want to hear the opposite side, and so I'm like, okay, so why is this important? I think it's important, but others might not. So I want to ask you this question.
So what a lot of it comes down to is money. So every library has a limited budget. They need to decide how they're going to expend their resources on services, on materials, on resources, and people. So if we're not doing a good job as a professional organization really explaining all of these services that have value to our communities, then we're doing a bit of a disservice there. So we really need to be proactive about explaining what reference and these other related services are, so that we can show our stakeholders, who are often our funders, why these services are important and really the positive impact that they're having in our communities.
Okay, that makes sense. See, I'm glad I asked this question, because we can have these discussions, but I think they're always linked to bigger things. And I think you're right. Funding, and we have to show these statistics and information and research. So I think it's important to acknowledge that, right? And so if we need to work on providing more evidence that these efforts are important for our communities, so that we don't get unfunded, right? And so
exactly, yeah, and that's a big part of advocacy, is just making sure that our communities and the elected officials, the chancellor of the university, all the people that are making these funding decisions have a strong awareness of the impact that the library services are offering.
No, yeah, especially because some of them might not understand this is going to be weird, but not that they don't understand the importance of libraries, but sometimes they don't understand the huge impact it has, or we have the whole new idea that our library is even being used, right? And so I think information like this is important to present, where it's like, no, they are being used, and these are the different methods and the different resources people use and want more of.
Oh, totally. It's funny. I mean, one of the things I talked about was reflecting back on some of the RUSA Presidents programs, and a couple years back, we had Lee Rainey from the Pew Internet and American Life Project. Yeah. And, one of the things he talked about, I've heard him, and I've seen other Pew reports since then that's reaffirmed this, people have this very positive connotation of libraries, which is great. But when you start asking people very specific questions about services that libraries offer, most people really don't have a really strong sense of what a modern library is. Yeah. It's still, the default assumption is it's, this big building full of books. So it really does take a dedicated effort to make sure that people in our communities, especially those decision makers, understand, this full scope of services and impact that we're offering. Yeah, no matter what the community is, whether it's a town, county, university, campus, it's the same thing. And one of my columns I wrote when I was RUSA president last year was really about that, was really trying to take the lessons we've learned in library advocacy from public libraries and how they might be applied to other environments too.
No, I think advocacy is an important topic to discuss, because I think sometimes those in power don't necessarily always use their libraries, public libraries or academic libraries. And so I think there's that misunderstanding, right, where it's like there's a silence of the patrons who are using these systems, and sometimes it's not getting across. So presentations such as yours or discussions such as these are important to have, because it makes people more aware, right? And this is where we understand our position, and we are therefore advocating for our position.
Yeah. I mean, it's showing those value numbers, and it's telling really powerful stories. Yeah. That's really what advocacy is all about, no matter what the environment is.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for that. I know we started talking about advocacy, but I want to return back to the future of
We went off topic.
I know.
Okay.
I realized I was like, wait, but it's important. I think they all they intersect, and so advocacy relates to this definition and the change and the trends, right? So, I wanted to return to the trends topic, the subtopic part of your presentation. So, one of the questions in your presentation is, how do we change reference services as trends continue and evolve, right? And so some of the trends you mentioned is income inequality, privacy shifting, collective impact, et cetera, et cetera. There's a few on it. Well, there's not a few. There's actually a lot, but
yeah, there are. And actually, I'll be totally honest. We ran out of time, so we didn't have we had planned this discussion where we were going to have people break into these small groups and basically talk about and what you're alluding to there are the trends that the Center for the Future of Libraries has described on their website. So if you're not familiar with it, it's at ala.org/transforminglibraries/future/trends. And what the center has done is a really nice job of taking a lot of really disparate trends that are out there impacting communities or just impacting the changes in technology or behaviors, and they really created this brief, usually like if you printed it out, it would probably just print out on one page, the potential impact on library service for each one of these. And I just think it's really cool how they developed it. And something that Cafe and Laura and I talked about after we ran out of time, we honestly had a technical glitch at the beginning, meaning that our laptop was knocked off of its little table, so it took us about 7-8 minutes to put the thing back up and reconnect it to its projector. It was a packed room. It was one of these where you could just feel the heat, and it was great. I mean, there was a lot of interest, but then we had this little problem of our laptop getting disconnected. So what we're talking about doing is maybe actually focusing just a discussion at next year's MLA DLA conference that's just around how might these trends impact the future of library service, specifically reference and ILL and Reader's Advisory Services, the things that RUSA is involved in. As I'm saying that, it just occurred to me that this might be a good discussion for maybe ALA Midwinter in January of 2017.
No, yeah, that would be good. No, I always develop new topics and new themes as I'm talking to people, and so I think it's exciting. I'm like, yay, more work needs to be done, and so it's good because it just continues to show how passionate we are. So, and I love discussion, and I love helping to lead and organize discussions. So that might be fun because that would be in Atlanta. That's in Atlanta,
January. Yeah,
I was looking at the list yesterday. I don't know, trying to see where I have to go.
Because you're going to be in the Spectrum program for the next year.
Yes, I'm going to be intern until midwinter. So I'll be in Atlanta next.
Oh, cool! Awesome.
So, and I'll be at Orlando too. So how do we change reference services as trends and continue and evolve? I know. So you said that you didn't quite or weren't able to present or talk about this at your presentation. So, but do you mind having this discussion now or answering these questions?
Oh yeah. So we didn't get into a lot of those topics, but some of the themes that I was able to talk about before we really got into that portion of the program was really focused on self-service and talking about how the ways that libraries, especially I'm focusing on public libraries here, are really embracing self-service both in their online environments and in the physical spaces, so that we can empower our customers, our patrons, our users, whatever term we want to use, and make sure that they're able to get the service they want, get out of the building, and have a great experience. And meanwhile, we can utilize our staff more effectively to do the things that really do demand an in-person transaction. Like, for instance, at HCPL, where all of our branches offer self-pickup of holds, so people can just come in, they pick up their material, and then they can use a self-checkout station to go ahead and check it out themselves. And if they want, they don't actually have to even talk to a person. We're going to be smiling and greet them and do our best to engage with them. But if they really don't want any of that, that's fine. They can get in, get out. And something we're really working on, too, is when there's people waiting in line, we're actually trying to guide people over to these self-checkout stations and show them how it works so that, if it's a long line the next time around, they'll be able to use it on their own. So they'll have that choice. But, there's other services like printing, of course, and photocopying, and there's, self-scanning machines and faxing. And we're actually going to be putting in a little bit later this year self-payment, so people can actually use the self-checkout station to pay their fines and fees and things like that too, using a credit card. Yeah, so what it does, it frees us up so that we can actually be out in the community doing outreach events. And something we're doing too now is when we see that there's 3 or 4 or 5 kids in the children's area, one of our librarians can just do an on-the-fly story time. So we're giving them this educational experience just on the fly that's not even scheduled, but that's a much more effective use of our librarians' time than just sitting at a desk and waiting. We really don't want to see that.
No, I think again, it's like going with the trend, right? So along those lines, do you have any recommendations for reference librarians on how to address these different trends? And you can see these trends on the slides.
Yeah, and in fact, I would recommend people just go to the ALA, the Future of Libraries, Center for the Future of Libraries page, because they're updating this, and it's a really nice way just to get a quick sense of like drones. Like, okay, maybe in 1 or 2 seconds you may think, oh, drones have nothing to do with library service. But do they? I mean, we could have that conversation right now and think, like, how might drones be used in a way by our communities? And, we've already heard about Amazon has an interest in maybe using drones for, delivery of products. Could that be some form of competition with the library, with the services that libraries are offering? Or could we harness that, ability to do interlibrary loan? It sounds maybe ridiculous at first, but when you start thinking about it, you're like, wait a minute, like, think about all the resources that we apply to, staffing that check in an item, put a receipt in it with the name of a customer, put it on a shelf, put it on a cart, put it on a truck, let that truck go to another part of the state or another part of the country, another part of the world. What if you could just somehow stick it onto this like weird flying device? Maybe not weird, but you know what I mean. I mean, it could actually be this huge time savings. And there's just, there's so many like different opportunities we could think through that, in another, if somebody's listening to this podcast for 5 or 10 years, they'll think like, whoa, you got so much of that wrong. But, maybe there's this like weird, there's this 10, 20% that somehow we predicted that, it's fun listening to podcasts from like 10, 20 years ago, and the same thing. You can
like, things change.
Yeah.
For all we know, in 10 years, there might be flying cars, right? So
there could be, finally. That's always the prediction for the future, right? Like Back to the Future Part 2. It's like, of course there's flying cars, but no, we never actually see them.
No, but so I think you bring up a good conversation, which is being aware of different trends and how anything can really relate to public libraries or libraries in general, right? And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, how can librarians be aware of these changes, and how do they continuously educate themselves about different trends and changes, right? And so...
Oh, that is an awesome question. So, I mean, I think it's keeping that awareness. So it's listening to podcasts, and I listen to a lot of, science and technology and news podcasts, but it's reading magazines and wikis and blogs, and if you're reading Wired magazine or you're reading other technology magazines, you're doing yourself a service because you're keeping aware of these trends that could be impacting your career and your customers and your communities, but you're also making yourself a more valuable candidate for any positions that you're applying for. So if you go into an interview and you can speak intelligently about some of these trends, you're going to be a more valuable candidate than somebody else, and that's going to make a difference.
No, it's true. I think it's one thing that I always really promote is that we must not only just stop being aware, but continue our education wherever we are, right? And even if we move, like, let's say, a different community, we must continuously educate ourselves about the community, and it's like it never stops, right? And so I think that's an important question, so I wanted to definitely ask you is how can we do this? And I think...
Oh, that's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, so it's really just a part of, like, if you apply for a job and through the interview, for the application process and the interview process, I think most of us realize, like, when you look at the library's website, you look at their strategic plan, you look at their annual report, and that informs you about the library, that you should study up the community. Look at the census site, and just do a quick take a look at the statistics. Just look at the data about where the jobs are, what kind of work people are doing, and that's going to inform you a lot about some of the things that the library can or should be doing.
No, it's true, and so I think that part of your presentation really was of interest to me, because I think it touches on a really important point, which is that as librarians, that we must always continuously learn and appreciate that, right? Appreciate that part of our careers, and so thank you for that.
Yeah, and I hope to actually have this conversation in a group too. So I'm thinking I definitely want to do this at midwinter in Atlanta next January. That would be awesome.
Yeah, and then people can bring up different trends that I might not be aware about, you might not be aware about, but it might be important in their community. And so I think that's where dialogue is really important, because no one knows their community more than the people living in it.
And that's a good idea. I'm thinking, because I just basically listed out the trends that the Center for the Future of Libraries had listed out, but like self-service, that's not here. So I think there's a lot of other trends that we'd want to probably include in some way. And then, as you said, give the opportunity for people to include a trend that maybe is important to they've recognized is important to their own community, and maybe allow for some discussion at the same discussion group too. That would be awesome.
Yeah, no. See, I'm glad that we're having these conversations. And so, let's say that then the person, one of the people listening to our podcast, goes and finds these trends. What do you recommend them to do with this information?
Let me think about that for a moment. Well, we talked about the impact that the just having an awareness of these trends can have on applying or interviewing for a job. But if you have an awareness of these, then make sure that you're if you're already working, make sure that you're sharing these with your coworkers, with your colleagues, with your library management. And I know, like, one thing we're doing at my library, just as an example, is we've set up these discussion threads using a web service called Slack. So you can, it's a really easy to download app. And so what we're doing is we've got this group called the Advanced Think Tank. And we've got a representative from each of our branches. And we're just basically posting stuff that we're discovering along the way. And, some are just links to articles. Some are like podcasts that we're listening to. So just make sure you're sharing back at your library, because, these aren't, any knowledge you pick up, it shouldn't just be for yourself. You want to be able to help your teammates and advance your whole organization. So there's a lot of ways to go about doing that too.
Thank you for that. No, I think it's important that we don't just educate ourselves, but share our information.
Right. We're not working in vacuums.
Yeah. So one of my big concluding question that I think kind of puts everything together is summarizing all our conversation and reflecting back on everything we've talked about: advocacy, the future, these trends. What does this mean for reference services and reference librarians? What's our next step? How do we use these reference services to be active members in our communities?
So number one, I would say we just need to make sure we're paying attention. We're maintaining our education and our learning. I know within public libraries, a lot of us, to maintain our certification, we need to attend training classes. So I would say look for those classes, look for those webinars that are geared to your interests, and make sure that you're then not just attending a program webinar and then going back and just doing things the same way you've always done them. Make sure you're then looking at how you can improve the service you're offering. Look for those, especially in inexpensive opportunities to tweak a service in some way that it's going to make a huge impact on your community. And that's the neat thing. When you really start thinking about and talking with your colleagues about these trends, you'll realize that there's some inexpensive ways that you can really change the environment for your customers. And right now I'm thinking about the user experience, just watching how they're using services, and then just making the little tweaks that need to be made. But of course, some changes need a lot of money. So you need to be a good advocate for your library. Work with your library administration, work with your friends, your foundation, your supporters, your elected officials, to make sure that they have a good understanding of the impact that the library is having. And I think if you can tie in those impacts with these current and future trends, it really it adds this additional impact to show that you're on the cutting edge and you're not resting on your laurels of what the library was 10, 20 years ago.
Yes. And so my concluding question is, I think that we'll go back to the beginning of our conversations and loop in around of what we talked about is, what is the future of reference? You might repeat some or say similar things, but I think this would be a good ending to our podcast is, what is the future of reference, and why is it important for us to be talking about it as we have?
Well, I think it's going to make it depends on really how our members, how reference librarians really advocate for themselves. How do we communicate the value of these services? And if we are effective at doing that, then we're going to have a great future ahead. If we don't tell those stories, if we don't show the statistics well enough, then I think the unfortunate reality would be that we're going to see other services funded in more effective ways, or other entities within our communities funded, or just the funding just shifted away to other purposes in general. So I hate to end on a sort of dark note, but really what I want to see reference librarians of all stripes doing is just being effective advocates for their libraries, and don't sit back and assume that somebody else is going to speak on your behalf. You want to work collaboratively with your leadership within your organization, but you just need to make sure you're out in front and telling your story.
No, yeah, I think the ending of your response was a very empowering thing. As a upcoming new librarian into the field, I think it's right. I think you're holding us accountable. You're holding everyone accountable in this position to not just sit and to really be empowering and be empowered to raise awareness and be aware. So thank you for that.
Sure, yeah. Oh my gosh, we could talk about this for hours.
Right?
There's so many nuances to this conversation too, but we don't have that much time.
Yeah, no. I'm like, it's almost really late where you are at. So, with that said, do you have any questions for me?
Patty, I would love to hear more about your new job and your new jobs. And what do you think? I don't know. Let me turn that last question on you. What do you think the future of reference is?
I think it goes back to what we've talked about. I think the future of reference, it's important for us to be aware that reference is changing, that we can't rely on these old definitions. And that goes for anything. When we have new movements and we have new trends, and so it's important for us as reference librarians or librarians in general to be aware of this, because our future depends on it. And so I think that's what it means. That it means that we have to be conscious human beings who understand our positionality everywhere we go to provide better access, but advocate for our communities and advocate for our positions, right? I think a lot of people today who are not in my sphere or my networks are always like, oh, you're a librarian? Does that even exist? And so it's about empowering my profession and being like, no, these libraries are being used by patrons, and my career is beneficial to society, and it's important, and so I need to empower myself, but I also need to work on empowering the community I work with and for. And so I think that's the future of reference, is to use these services to provide more information, equitable and accessible information. So I don't know.
Exactly. That's so well said, and that's a topic we barely even touched on here. But there's so many ways that libraries can advance their communities by helping break that digital divide and help people really gain some of the skills that they need that they don't have opportunities to gain otherwise in their communities, so that they can be successful. So maybe that's another topic for another podcast.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so Well, thank you so much, Joe, for being
Thank you, Patty.
on my podcast and allowing me to interview you. Do you have any last words to share?
I don't. I'm just looking forward to seeing lots of people in Orlando for ALA Annual. It's going to be a fun time, and do encourage people to get involved in their professional organizations. It's a really nice way to make connections and good way to build experiences that will really help develop skills that then you can apply for jobs and really advance your career. That's what I found myself, and I think others will find that too.
Yeah, and share information, right? That was a big topic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Joe. I will let you go. So thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah, I really appreciated the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you.